SNC Podcast-Episode 49. We have Ed Jowett with us. See, I got it right. Haha.
Congratulations.
Like we've done.
And thank you very much.
He's here to talk about his Kickstarter, Violet, and yeah, a bunch of other stuff. So let's talk about that. What is your elevator pitch for that?
So Violet #2 Backlash is the second it's the second comic about Violet, who is an empowered, a superhero in my universe. She recently fought a supervillain in the first Violet comic, Violet Unstoppable, and this supervillain very nearly defeated her, very nearly actually killed her. And although the physical scars from that have healed, the emotional damage that caused, you know, the mental scars, if you like, are still very much there for her. And we open the comic with sort of, I know that I'm not normal, and I'm trying to figure out what on earth life really is now. You know, should I still be acting the same way? And the comic really is about her progression from that situation through meeting another young woman called Unnamed, who also has her own kind of issues, and getting to reach sort of a new normal and healing those emotional scars that were caused by her tangle with the supervillain I mentioned, Rampage. And there's a villain in it, but he's more there to kind of force that, force, in storytelling terms, he's more there to force addressing those issues. It's a comic about the people behind the mask, and the way in which that a realistic person wouldn't just shrug off their first supervillain fight. You know, that's something that's going to stay with you forever. It's going to affect you for the rest of the time that you're a superhero. The first supervillain who really genuinely nearly takes you down. You know, there's always going to be something about that you never entirely escape. And it's about Violet finding her new normal after, this really difficult time. And it's a comic about, it's about overcoming these kind of mental health issues that we're talking about. That's a matter that's very close to my heart. I've gone through some mental health issues. Many people have. And I think particularly during COVID, it's really important that we have a reminder from time to time that having mental health issues is okay. And it is also possible to recover. And sometimes recovery can come on its own, or it needs help. Sometimes that help comes from a place where you might not have immediately expected. But when you know that there's something wrong, it is possible to recover from that and find a new normal, as it were.
That's pretty awesome too, because so many hip hop artists and rappers and a lot of even rock bands, some of the stuff that got them through some dark times were comic books. Like if you listen to a lot of the old hip hop music, they reference comics all the time, and it's because it's this time where they can escape and go be a superhero. But it's interesting because you're actually diving into the problem they might be dealing with, but even a superhero has to deal with it. So that's kind of a cool take on it.
One of the things that I've always felt was really important when I write superhero comics, and I should just mention Jonathan Lewis at this point. He's my sort of my number one guy in terms of comics. He's worked with me on pretty much everything we've ever done. And although Jennifer and I co-wrote this, he dialogue edits most of what we do and sort of looks it over and gives us comments. But one of the things that he and I strongly agree on is that superheroes are more than the person with the mask on. And most of the interesting stories about superheroes are the ones about the person behind the mask and how they cope with balancing life between the mask and not the mask. And, obviously, Spider-Man, Iron Man, various others, they've all had this very difficult journey through learning how to cope with real life despite all of the things that they're doing. And those tend to be the most engaging and interesting stories, in my opinion, and John very much agrees. So while there is more than its fair share of superhero action in Violet Backlash, there is, it's important that we keep that human element because she's still a person. And I think that's an important part of being able to identify with the character. Violet has a lot of traits that a lot of people share. Her family are actually immigrants, but she was born in the country she's in. So there's this "are we going to be deported" thing, which it's a thing that comes up in the first issue. They have a conversation about it. She has to go through what a lot of women have to go through when going on public transportation. It's kind of the city she's based in is kind of like London. There's an underground system. And in the first issue, she sits down opposite someone, and he's just staring at her, and she's sort of like, okay, I'm a superhero, and yeah, I could punch him through the wall, but I'm not wearing my costume right now. I'm my civilian persona, so I'm just gonna kind of steer clear of him and sort of step off the train, stay out the way. And I think that whether you're a superhero or not, I think that people face these kinds of issues. And I think that having those as part of the characters is an important thing in making them human.
Well, I think the cool thing about that too is like it's the same reason Spider-Man was one of the I think he's still like the number1 favorite superhero, and the reason why is he's so relatable to kids first because he's a teen, and like the biggest reason he's relatable is that he has like all these things that happen, like he has to live in a poor neighborhood and his uncle dies and all this stuff. Like you have all this background, but then the other interesting thing that I think that probably is the reason that comic books help people get over their own problems is you get to see someone who has your normal problems and has to go fight a supervillain later and has and still has to keep account of that other stuff. And you're like, my problem's not that bad.
Well, there is that, but there's also, look, at the end of the day, these people are overcoming these problems, and you can see a path to overcoming these issues that, to any normal person, seem insurmountable. And I think that, Spider-Man is a good example. Violet is a similar example. You can be strong, you can be fast, you can be able to shoot webs out of your hands. That doesn't actually get you away from most of the real life problems that most people face. So Peter Parker still has to deal with more than his fair share of problems. And he does it, and he gets through it, and he finds a way through it. And I think that's one of the reasons that Spider-Man, as you say, has always been one of the top few superheroes. I think that's one of the reasons that, I'm not sure what they're calling him today, but Captain Marvel, Billy Batson, has always been, one of, ever since he was created, he's been one of the world's favorite superheroes, or certainly America's favorite superheroes, because the kid, he's Charlie Brown, I mean, like, nothing good happens to this kid, this poor kid, and yet he overcomes it, not because he's Captain Marvel and able to go off and Shazam, and they're calling him Shazam now, aren't they? I lose track. I'm sorry.
It's been a long time, yeah.
First one's awesome. Movie.
I did see the movie and it was good fun.
I still have to see it.
And he it's not because he goes off and does this stuff. It's because as himself, he goes and deals with these issues and approaches them and handles them. And I think there's a lot to be said for the writers of those comics that, as you say, they helped people through dark times. I think there's a lot to be said for the writers because, I'm sure it's no stranger to you guys. A lot of creative people go through a lot of very difficult times. It's not easy being creative, and being able to bring that into what you're creating is fantastic. For me, I'm so proud to have been able, as I said, to bring sort of these kinds of issues that Violet is feeling. She knows she's not feeling the way she was feeling a month ago. and she can't quite put her finger on what's wrong. And, you know, it's sort of like, yeah, but, you know, I was told that if you're wondering if you're insane, you're probably fine. Is sort of her eventual conclusion from that right at the beginning of the comic. Because, you know, and that's what they always say, isn't it? I think that's a really important part of being a creator. Being able to do that is a really important part of being a creator, because Violet is a character who I've been able to pour a lot of the things that I think about a lot into, and really bring them to life in a way that it can be really hard to tell those stories. And don't get me wrong, it is not only hard to tell that story, it's hard for me to come on a podcast like this and actually talk about it, because there's so much stigma attached to I'm not feeling right. You know, I know I'm not quite right, and I don't know what's wrong, but I know I'm not quite right. There's a lot of stigma attached to that, you know, in our culture. And I think that the only way that you can get around that is to help more people understand that they may have experienced this to some degree at some point in their lives. And if that does that for even one person, I'm going to call that a win, you know?
Oh yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. That's a very cool way to do it, because like there's like, you know, the medical routes, which, you know, obviously if you're feeling depressed, you should absolutely, you know, seek out.
Yeah.
You know, but it's one of those things where, yeah, like sometimes people are just like right on the edge of like they don't know whether or not they're okay kind of thing, and sometimes all they do need to do is have someone listen. And if you don't have someone, a comic is like the greatest way to, like, you know, almost pretend like somebody's listening, and like, you know, you can, except that person's never going to tell anybody. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of the cool thing about just, you know, diving into stories in general. Like I'm not a big fictional reader, meaning like books. I love comic books, so it's not like I don't read fiction, but like I don't like fictional books, but I understand the appeal. You get to escape into this world. But for comics, like for me, the reason I enjoy them is because of that. Like, you get to escape, but you also get this fantastic art with it. So you get to, you know, actually see the world that the artist or creator envisioned, and, you know, go through whatever is in your own head while following whatever's in this person's head.
Yeah, it's maybe a little more immersive.
Yes. Yeah.
In terms of the world, it gives you a little more, rather than having to come up with all of the pictures yourself in your head. I can completely understand that. And for me, you know, I create other things as well. I create tabletop role-playing games.
Very cool.
Card games. I've finished writing my first novel recently.
Nice.
And that'll be coming out soon. And obviously I create comics as well, and audio dramas.
Can you say the name of the novel?
I can't at the moment.
Nice.
I'm not allowed. Yet. I say I've finished writing it. I'm co-writing it with someone else, and it's I can tell you that it's based in our sci-fi universe.
Cool.
Which we produced a number of comics in, and also some audio dramas. And it was our very first role-playing game. But I can't actually talk too much about the novel. We've only just finished it. We've got to agree a title for starters. So I have something I like, and if I go ahead and announce it, then he'll be like, oh, you know, I didn't want to call it that, but now you've announced it. So yeah, no, I can't actually tell you what the title is yet. But it's you know, it's sort of a fun sci-fi adventure. Maybe I'll come back and talk to you about it when it's about ready to come out.
Yeah, definitely, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that each of those media gives you a chance to tell a different kind of story. Right? So a tabletop role-playing game is almost like a doorway into the universe. You know, you get a lot of the artwork that you're talking about in the comics. You get a lot of the, you know, the kind of the cool stuff and the sort of tent poles of events, as it were. These events happened and led you to this point. Now you can do what you like and tell your own story. Mm-hmm. With a comic, you get to kind of go, okay, this event that we talked about, we kind of gloss over it, right? Now we're going to go in, we're going to say, okay, look, this is how this character felt, how they saw the world, how the world looked through their eyes. And it's such a different kind of story to what you can tell in a role-playing game. And then with audio, you don't get to do the pictures, but you get to do a different part of the feeling. There's something about sound and soundscaping and music when it's done really well that gives you something that comics can never give you. It's not how the world looks, it's how the world feels.
Yeah.
And I think novels give you the opportunity to go, okay, this is the story that's happening, and I'm describing things, but anything that I've not specifically described, I'm letting you build the world. I'm letting you imagine. And I think that all of those things, you could tell the same story in 4 different ways, and each one would come across differently. It's one of the things that interests me a lot right now, and I don't know if we're done talking about Violet yet, and I don't want to kind of steer the conversation in a particular direction. But one of the things I'm doing is I'm making audio dramas from the comics that we've produced.
Yeah, that's cool.
And we're actually launching one on the 4th of November. We're launching one called The Bug War number 2. Infiltration of the Bug War number 2. I have the script right here. There you go.
Nice.
And I literally took the comic that we'd made, and I went ahead and adapted it to become an audio drama. And in particular, this one was a real challenge because there's a lot where we just showed, and he barely said, like the main character barely said anything.
So you kind of got
and we had to do a lot of work to make it so that, particularly with soundscapes, to make it so that people could understand what on earth was going on. Some of that was adding some extra lines to kind of explain. Some of it was, you know what, we're doing this with a soundscape, and it's just going to sound, you know, like you're going to be like, whoa, what? There's a point where he's running through like an orbital bombardment coming down, and you know, he's like, what? And like an explosion goes next to him, and we had the explosion, and it just didn't sound right. So what we did is we literally added a ringing in his ears, right? And you're just sat there and goes, boom!
That's
ringing.
awesome. Yeah.
You know, like, ah! You know, even while because he goes, Val, his virtual assistant is called Val, and he goes, Val! And she'll go, don't worry, I know exactly where all the bombs are going to land. And so do you. They're using your coordinates after all. And he's like, okay. He sort of starts running again. But, you know, even while she's explaining this, we've got the ringing in our ears from that explosion being so close.
That's cool.
And while you can show that really easily in a comic, we found it really hard to do in audio to actually, you know, until we came up with the idea of adding ringing. Full credit to the editor, Ben Spadaro, for that. And as I say, I think you can convert one thing into another thing, and you're almost telling a completely different story at that point. You know, people could listen and read along with the comic and very much enjoy that. And then they get both the feel and what things look like. And having each one stand alone and then the opportunity to do them both together, there's something that I'm finding very interesting at the moment. I have kind of fads about things I find interesting in terms of themes. A little while ago, I did a thing about duality. I did a whole bunch of games where, in some way, each pair of characters were intertwined. I did a game about fighter pilots who, you know, all of their physical stats came from their fighter, and then they were the mental and social stats. I did a game about, it was actually a game based on a novel series, a sci-fi novel series of a very good friend of mine, Richard Tung. And I did a game, in this game, you play as 2 characters at the same time. You have one who's an officer on the ship, and he's, you know, doing the whole ship combat thing, or you know, being on the ship thing anyway. And then you've got a Marine who's basically expendable. And you play as both of these characters at the same time.
So it's kind of like RTS meets RPG. That's kind of cool.
Kind of. There was a level to which I was inspired by PlanetSide.
Yeah.
because obviously, you know, they have the multiple levels of different stuff you can do. And, you know, I was quite inspired by that, and I thought, oh, I know, this is a really good opportunity to do that. And, you know, I played with Duality for a bit. I'm kind of past the Duality thing now, and I'm moving on to, okay, what about different genres telling the same story at the moment? And that's what the Bug War 2 audio drama is about. I mean, it's also about giving, I know this sounds a bit funny, giving voice actors a voice. I think there are a lot of people out there who would like to create, who either don't know how. You know, like, okay, they know how to voice act, but they don't know how to get involved with things, or they don't know, you know, how to kind of publicize their work when they've done it, or, you know, various other bits and pieces. Or they're not much of a writer. I mean, they're a great voice actor, but you know, they're not really going to write something, so they kind of need a script and to work on stuff. And casting calls are pretty cutthroat, to be honest, in the voice acting world.
Well, that was very clicky too. Like once you get in, it's like those are the people that they kind of keep forever. Like think about anime. Like holy crap! Like you can hear the same 5 voice actors in every anime that's like ever been made. It's like, I get it, Piccolo, stop lecturing me. Like, it's like, hey, this isn't Dragon Ball.
Not only that, they're all the same voice actors. Yeah, as you say, yeah. It's kind of one of those things where I feel like people ought to be given a chance to prove what they can do. And maybe what they can do isn't as good as they think it is. That's possible. Or maybe what they can do is fantastic. And the thing is that these audio dramas that I'm doing now, I have this tendency, particularly with audio, to get a little out of control. So what I did is I thought, okay, right, I'm interested in this new media idea. I'm going to turn one of my comics, it's called Counting Down from 1, I'm going to turn it into an audio drama. And that means I have 7 parts. Okay, cool. So I put out a casting call, and I get 50 applicants. And I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Okay, I have 9 comics. Let's go. And I literally wrote them all up into audio dramas, and we recorded them all before COVID happened. We're now in the process of editing through them. We've released 2 or 3 so far, but one of them was pre-COVID, completely pre-COVID. You know, I just wrote them all up. I got every voice actor who reasonably could. One of the things I did insist on at the time is it needed to be local to London. They had to be able to come in and record in my home studio so that I knew the quality was good. But apart from that, it was, come in, I will find you a part if you want to do it, let's do it. And we had a lot of fun, we recorded a lot of stuff, we've got loads of stuff going on. Since then, Leo, my head of audio, so kind of I'm like of Shades of Vengeance, which includes SOV Comics, it includes Irremo, which is the audio, and Shades of Vengeance, which is the games bit. I'm sort of I'm the CEO, I'm kind of the creative control overall. But Jonathan Lewis, who I mentioned earlier, he is in charge of the comics, and Leo is in charge of the audio. And I said to Leo, okay, Leo came to me and said, okay, Ed, I've got some money, let's hire a writer to write a podcast and do like a 10-episode podcast. I was like, okay, cool, let's do that. Put out a casting call, or put out a writer's call, 57 applicants. I was like, okay, all right then. We only had money for 1. So what I did is I actually offered, some of them were really not very good writers, I'm sad to say, and I had to say, look, I'm really sorry, I don't think what you're doing is what we're looking for. But, you know, a good number of them were excellent, and I hate to turn good people away. So I said, hey, look, we can't pay you up front. Work with us, and we'll run a Kickstarter, and we'll pay you out of the proceeds of the Kickstarter, because then we'll have money from that. And 9 people agreed to that, and we hired 1 for the original project we had. 9 people agreed to that, so we now have 10 podcasts currently in various stages of production. Most of them are writing between episode 1 and 5 at the moment. So I'm expecting to have a lot of audio content.
That's cool.
I've got voice actors lining up around the block, yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be really good fun. I love creating. I don't know what to say.
That's very cool. I was gonna say, for the podcast, are they like? So is that like a story broken across a podcast? Is that kind of like what those are gonna be?
Yeah, and so one of the strengths of what we do is that it's all based in the same universes, right? So we have our sci-fi universe and our superhero universe, which are probably the 2 primary ones that we build stuff in. We've got our survival horror universe. We've got a low fantasy universe. We've got a variety of other universes. I could go through. There are 10. Okay, I won't go through one by one. I don't want to bore everyone. But each one of those has a role-playing game. You see, and I'll create these universes, and then I'll go, okay, let's do some more, and we'll go away and we'll do a sci-fi comic or a superhero comic or an audio drama or whatever. So when I spoke to these writers, I basically gave them an option of which universe would you like to write something in. So we've got several based in our sci-fi universe, we've got several based in our superhero universe, we've got a couple based in our sort of existential horror universe, I'd call it, and then there's a survival horror universe, which is a different one to that. And we've got one based in there. We've got, we've got all of these different stories, which, yes, they're the story of the one person, episodically for 10 episodes. We've come up with an arc for all of them about, how we grow the character during that time. We divide it up into episodes based on events or whatever. But the idea broadly is, it's going to be 5 hours of content per per podcast.
Yeah.
Podcast. Yeah, we're doing fish, people.
Delicious. Fish and chips, right?
Yeah, sure. Just because I'm British.
Yeah.
So yeah, we do, we've got all these podcasts, and they're all based in these same worlds. And the thing about this is that means that whenever someone likes something about one of our worlds, they can just go away and pick up the novel, or oh, I heard this podcast and I really liked it, and I really think it sounds like a great one for a role-playing game. So they can go away and pick up the role-playing game, or pick up the comic, or, I'm really interested in this character, which I read about in the role-playing game. There's a comic for it. Fantastic. Let's go and get hold of that comic. So it means that, as I was saying, sort of role-playing games are like a door into the universe. But then all of these other things sort of open up a different window that you can look through and sort of discover more about the way the universe looks and feels and sounds than otherwise you might be able to if sort of everything was its own unique world, if that makes sense.
That's very cool.
Yeah. You're like the perfect example of like what more people should be doing.
Which is
creating multiple types of content. There's people that just have trouble creating the one comic. They should be creating they could create a podcast. If you don't like doing that, you could create video.
I think that part of it. So I should say to anyone who is watching, to anyone who's listening, who's going, yeah, I'm listening to all the things you've done. Yes, I have published almost 100 books. I have published 3 so far card games, and I've got 2 more literally sitting on my shelf waiting to be published because of COVID. I've now, I've finished 7 or 8 audio dramas. I've got 10 podcasts on the way. Most of the books are comics or role-playing games. Yes, I have, but it all starts with one. And there are 2 things to remember. First of all, don't expect to do everything yourself. You won't be able to, right? No one is good at everything, right? I've worked with a number of artists. I've worked with freelance artists. I've worked with freelance writers to write short stories for my role-playing games. I can write them, but not as well as other people can. Whereas on the other hand, actually creating the rules or building the world, I have not got anyone else in my team who does that as well as I do. So I do that. That's the first thing. So don't expect to be able to do everything. Secondly, just do it. Like seriously, what have you actually got to lose? Like,
do it.
just kind of make the thing.
Yes,
and put it out into the world, even if it's for free, right? Even if you're not confident about it and you want to put it out for free, or, you know, figure out a pay what you want, or, you know, there's Drive-Through Comics, which does a pay what you want if you're a comic person. Or you know, if you're not confident in your writing, you know, jump on a Facebook group and go, hey, I've done this artwork and I'm not really confident in my writing. Would anyone like to sort of work with me? Yeah, some people want to be paid, and yeah, some people will just go, yeah, fine. I'll work with you. Let's see if we can make this a thing. I'm inspired.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to do it just because it's something you've never done before. Especially, I don't know if the US are. We're going back into lockdown. Everyone's going back on furlough for another month minimum. It happens to also be NaNoWriMo. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. It's National Novel Writing Month. I mean, it's actually kind of International Novel Writing Month.
What was it? Say the name?
NaNoWriMo.
NaNoWriMo.
Yeah.
I think this is a fantastic opportunity for anyone to get creative. One of the things I do on my Discord server, I'm working with 5 or 6 people at the moment. We're all doing our own thing. So at the moment, I'm still writing stuff for one of my role-playing games, which I kickstarted earlier in the year. And I'm just I call it Irremo, because it's not writing and it's not necessarily writing a novel either. But it is writing in the Era universes. All of my universes are Era something. So for Era Survival, I'm at the moment I'm in the middle of writing up 30 settlements that exist in this world and their unique traits and their, you know, the people who live there and what they're like and so on, as a reference book for the role-playing game. It's one of the expansions I'm writing. So I said, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write a settlement a day. And I'm also going to sit down and I'm going to write a scenario every day for all of November. That will come to around 2,000 words in total. That sounds like a really, really good thing. Let's go ahead and do that. And in the same way, I've got one person doing who's composing music every day. Just you know, from sessions that they've played that inspired them. I'm going to compose some music. And I've got Leo. He's gone away to he desperately wants to write a role-playing game, which he and I worked together on creating the universe. He really wants to have written a role-playing game. You know, now that I've got 10, you know, he wants to write one, add it to that list. So that Shades of Vengeance is offering. So he's gone away, and his aim is to write this role-playing game during Irremo. And I've got another guy who's doing improvs, like audio improvs, sort of 5 minutes in character, kind of like, you know, in one of the universes. And of course, it doesn't specifically have to be in one of my universes. I think people should use this opportunity, particularly since we're under lockdown, many people are on furlough. Now is the time to say, okay, I'm really going to sit down and I'm going to write 2,000 words a day, or I'm going to do an hour of whatever. You know, I say that I would actually, anyone who's thinking of doing this, first of all, I hope these guys might put my Discord link in the show notes.
What is it, by the way? And we'll definitely put it in the show notes. But is it is it one of easy, like?
No, it's one of those horrible.
Okay, we'll put it in the YouTube description and. Show notes,
but check out the YouTube description. Feel free to join us, of course, but don't try and spend 6 hours or 2 hours or 1 hour a day doing stuff. Come up with something else as a measure of time.
Yeah,
so,
like 100 words.
2,000 words or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Because what you'll find is when you start on the first, it will take you a long time. And when you get to the 30th, not only will you be doing much better than you were on the first, if you compare the two pieces of material, you'll be doing it way faster. And it's really nice to see that by doing this and applying yourself to the thing that you love every day, you've made progress in the thing you love.
That's a really good idea too, to not put it on a time, because that's much harder to like measure like growth or success with whatever you're doing. Oh, we lost him. Where'd he go?
Oh, he'll be back.
Oh,
Yeah.
There he is.
It does that.
It does.
Apology.
No worries.
But
I was just gonna say, not using time as a measurement is a great thing to do, because it's like there's a book I read called Mini Habits, and what it talks about, the one I have in particular is called Mini Habits for Weight Loss, but it's got another series. But the concept of mini habits are to take whatever it is you ultimately want to do and figure out how to break it down so small that it's impossible to fail. Like say you want to work out more. Well, in all reality, what you really want to do is become someone who works out. And the best way to do that is to work out every day. But you don't want to go, I'm going to work out 45 minutes a day. That's nonsense. No, you won't. You'll do it 3 days if you do it at all, and then you'll never do it again. So you want to figure out, like, how's this? I'm going to do, and this is why it's called mini habits, 1 push-up a day every day. And that might be too small to like get any gains, but the point isn't to only do 1 push-up. The idea is once you do one push-up,
your mental,
and you start momentum. It's momentum. Like
exactly,
once you go down to do 1 push-up, if you do 1 push-up, you're going to be like, that's dumb. I'm going to do 10, right? And like the whole point is that even on that day that you're literally like on planes all day traveling for work and you can't do anything, you can stop in the middle of an airport and do 1 push-up. You know what I mean? It is impossible to not do the mini habit, like because you're somebody who works out. And in this case, that's why I said like 100 words. Like that's much better than like 2,000. Like 100, or maybe even like 1 sentence a day. And by just doing that, like that's so small that if you're a writer, you can do one. If you're not a writer, you can do 1 sentence a day. Everyone can write down 1 sentence a day, but you do it every single day. And a great example of that is Seth Godin, who's like the godfather of marketing, and he has a blog that he has written on every day for over 12 years. Like every day, 365 days a year for over 12 years. And some of the blogs are like 4 paragraphs and some of them are 2 sentences, right? But the whole point is there's never been a day that's gone by that he hasn't written in that blog. And so that's the reason he's an amazing copywriter, is because he wrote every day. And because of that, he's been perfecting this skill over time. And it's the same with storytelling. It's the same with creating, whether it's board games, video games, comic books, novels. Like you just got to do it. Like that's how you become better. Like put your time.
I will say, last year, in fact, going back a bit further, I recently was reading over some of the stories I wrote for Era the Empowered, my core rulebook for the superhero game. And I was like, did I write this? This is fantastic. Really? I wrote this? I don't remember writing this well.
That's pretty funny.
But yeah, it is. It's like you say, it's that micro habit of, I just made the decision I was going to sit down, and no matter what, I was not going to go to bed without having written 2,000 words. Even if it's a pile of crap, it doesn't matter. I would write 2,000 words minimum a day. Now, more normally during Irremo last year, I was more like 4,000, 5,000 words a day. That was more common for me.
But that's why you set that minimum bar, though. It's like you might write 10,000 words one day, but it's like you can't go to sleep until you've hit 2,000. Like,
Yeah, it's just, I made myself a promise that until I hit this point, I'm just not gonna stop. I'm not gonna lie down. I'm not gonna go to sleep, even if I am just, and like I'm typing complete crap that makes no sense in the morning. I'm going to at least write 2,000 words and get there, right? And maybe it's 100 for you. I mean, I'd like to think it's more than 1 sentence, because 100 words really isn't that many. But yeah, it's about, and I think, as I say, I think during furlough, it's very easy to sit around and just watch Netflix. And I'm aware of a lot of people who are like, I really want to be a voice actor, or I really want to be a writer, or I really want to do this or that or whatever, who were on furlough. I was never on furlough. I worked all through. I'm very lucky. My job allows me to work from home. But you know, I'm aware of a lot of people who said, "Oh, I really want to do this," and then, what did you do during 3 months while you're on furlough? Oh yeah, well, I mean, I watched pretty much everything on Netflix and Hulu and
yeah,
Amazon Prime, and I'm like, like really? That was what you did with your time? You know, you had 3 months of time where every day you could have written 2,000 words, and by the time you get to a point where you're writing a lot, 2,000 words, you can churn that out in an hour. You can. As long as you're not going for something that's really, really top-notch, perfect edited, you can churn that out in an hour. And you can become this amazing copywriter like you're talking about by doing the job. You sit there and you do it. You write about something that interests you.
Well, even not just what interests you. So here's another one. I think this was like Tim Ferriss, who's like a serial entrepreneur, and one of the things he talked about was write down like 8 bad sentences on purpose, almost just to get it out of your head. Like just be like, just nonsense writing. Like,
so I've written this book, and it's not quite out yet. It's called The Writer's Journey.
Nice.
It's an adventure in common storytelling mistakes. And what it is it's like, do you remember those old choose your own adventure books where it's like turn to page X?
Yeah.
It's one of those, but as you go through it, depending on what choice you make, the plot might just dead end. And it will be big, and I will then do a deliberate writing mistake and go, this is a thing you should not do, and here's why you should not do it. Don't go around breaking the fourth wall in the middle of your novel. Yes, I know Deadpool does that, but these writers are very experienced, and if you're a first-time writer, that comes off as either very derivative or very corny.
Yeah.
So try to avoid that if you're a first-time writer until you have literally read everything on the subject, you know everything there is to know about storytelling, and then at that point, yeah, feel free.
That's also a good point, is like, people, like, before you, like, if you haven't created anything yet, just write. Like, you need to just write. But after that, like, if you want to make it professionally, or if you want to make it so that you're making high quality things, this is something. So my brother's a music producer. We work with a team of other music producers, and the thing I consistently say to all of them is, you need to know all the rules so that you can learn how you will break them, right? Like, because you still need to follow the rules, but the thing that makes you unique compared to everyone else is the way that
the way you break them.
Yes, and it's because you're like, oh, it's right here. What if I just go here, right? As opposed to like being over here where you're not even in rule land. You're in some weird crazy place.
Rather than subverting a trope, you're kind of showing your inexperience.
Well, it's the big thing about indie creators in general. Many indie films, the reason they're terrible isn't because they're low budget. It's because they decided they're going to break all of the rules of movie making, and they think that will be creative. But the thing is, it might be creative, but no one will watch it. Like, if you want someone to watch it, you need a part of the hero's journey. You need a part of, X, Y, and Z. You need a beginning, a middle, a climax, an end. Like, you need these things to keep someone focused. It's like the reason why, what is it? Like, all these ads have, like, say sexualized things in them is because it works. Like, it doesn't always work, but the point is it works enough times to risk it. Like, if you're going to spend money on ads, why not do it on something that might work? So it's the same with storytelling. Like, you gotta stick to some semblance of the rules and then make your unique changes to them.
I agree 100%, yeah.